The Whiteout game, a top 10 showdown, Penn State versus Oregon. ESPN's College Game Day is coming to town. It's the matchup that we've been waiting for, and then some.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are locked on to Penn State football. Thank you so much for joining me on the first of many conversations this week to talk Penn State versus Oregon. I guess it's not even technically game week, but we're here anyway, and we're going to talk about it and have many conversations to break it all down. As always, I am your host, Seyko, Penn State credentialed media member for both the football and wrestling. And thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions part of your daily routine to talk about all things Penn State sports as we focus on Oregon primarily, the first impressions, offense, defense, tons of speed on this team. Question marks about this team. Where can Penn State attack Oregon and win this game? But the first impressions, starting first and foremost with Dante Moore, this offense, because it is different. This is a live show, so let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Be a part of the conversation. We'll get questions answered and also address any comments from Penn State and Oregon fans alike. So, beginning with my first impressions of Oregon, starting with Dante Moore in the offense, is that, the offense has not missed a beat. This group, going from Dillon Gabriel, seasoned veteran, right, knew the game of college football very well. That was a wide receiver core that just had the electric offense from a year ago, ground game, and Oregon was able to maintain that. And honestly, some people might argue that they're even better than last year. Now, I don't know that I would go that far. I think that Dante Moore and Oregon's offense to this point are close to that measure, but I don't know that they're exactly that. Again, Oregon's offense, I thought, was a little more efficient at times, but the explosiveness is still there. The electricity is there. There haven't been the growing pains that, myself included, I think some people would have expected initially. Not anything egregious, but to go from again, Dillon Gabriel to somebody who's not a proven starter, but does have that necessary experience in Dante Moore. A brand new backfield. But as I look at this backfield, this team has potentially 3, maybe 4 different running backs that they can rely on in some sort of workhorse capacity. And I think that's very telling with what they've been able to do through the transfer portal and in recruiting as well. But also the offensive line. That was an offensive line that had a lot of NFL prospects from a season ago, and then they worked their way through the transfer portal, and they're able to get guys on the same page. An Oregon team, when you compare and contrast them, because if I'm here to claim that, last team at least looks slightly better in a head-to-head hypothetical battle, but they didn't have the same issues early on. That was a team that, went toe-to-toe with Boise State, that went toe-to-toe with FCS Idaho. And this Oregon team has now blown out Oregon State in a rivalry game, which you never look past. They've also blown out the likes of Oklahoma State, which, we can talk about some of those games in depth. They won very decisively against a Northwestern team where the deck was stacked against them. A 9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff. So Oregon at least has the look that, hey, they might have even taken a step forward. But like I said, when you compare and contrast, I do think last year's team had just a little bit more than this year. But here's the thing with Oregon, though. Penn State is getting them at an opportune time, because I only think that this group's going to get better. So Dante Moore is only going, this isn't the final version of Dante Moore. This isn't the final version of DeCorian Moore. Some of these young running back potential superstars down the road, and the offensive line is only going to build more chemistry, right? These aren't veteran players that have kind of hit their peak, that have kind of hit their ceiling. No, I still think there is the best yet to come for this Oregon team. So the matchup itself for Penn State, in terms of the whiteout early in the season, fresh off of a bye and a non-conference slate that, you could argue the battle test, is Penn State really tested? But at the same time, they're rested. Right? Oregon has now gone through the likes of Oregon State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, but still, your starting running back could be out for this game against Penn State. There's been some other key injuries to go along with that. For the most part, and if you look at health, Penn State is in, I think, a much better situation than what Oregon is when you compare the two teams. So initially on Dante Moore there, a quarterback that obviously doesn't have the experience of Dillon Gabriel, but is not as inexperienced as you would think he would be. I think his time with Chip Kelly and UCLA and everything that was going on there, immediately thrown into it. A bad situation, but better because of it. Better because of the adversity. I've already seen the reports, and it's fun because Bo Nix was at Auburn and played in a whiteout game and lost to Penn State 28-21 once upon a time. And Dante Moore is going to contact Bo Nix. And I think, and it's fun to maybe poke a little bit of fun at and joke with, but I don't know that Dante Moore needs as much advice, if you will, if you think about it. Because he's been a starter. This isn't his first go around. And then to sit behind a Dillon Gabriel. So look at him more as a true veteran quarterback. Don't look at him as somebody that is brand new to this. He's going to, deer in the headlights type of situation. The whiteout, the bright lights, it's going to be too much for him. No, that's not who Dante Moore is. Dante Moore almost has that proven veteran experience to an extent. Extremely accurate, right? There are a couple times where he'll miss a pass and it surprises me. It's like, oh, you missed that? I can't believe you missed that. Remember, he is a former five-star quarterback. But he's completing passes almost 80%. That's what I mean. The accuracy is spot on. It's the decision-making as well that makes him look more than just a true first-time starter, right? Because he did start games at UCLA as a true freshman, but it's that experience that really sets him apart, that gives Oregon at least a leg up early on in the season like this, where they're not kind of playing catch-up, playing from behind. Like I said, this backfield, so Noah Whittington is going to be the starter if he is healthy, but Oregon has been very cautious with how they utilize him. With that being said, they have tons of running backs. I mean, it's not just Whittington. They could go with, and that's what they've done over these past few games. They've gone with Jaden Lamar. Saw a lot of him against Oregon State. You see the likes of a Jordan Davison, who will get those short goal line carries. Already has 5 rushing touchdowns on the season. So that's kind of a necessary 1-2 punch if Oregon wants to lean on the ground game. If Penn State's really conscious of the explosive passing attack and DeCorian Moore and Malik Benson, which I'm going to get to here on this live show. Don't worry. Kenyon Sadiq. Right? It's the offense. This is a team that wants to put up points on the board. They want to get into a track meet, but the ground game is going to be necessary. Hill, another running back who's leading the team in yards. So between Hill, Whittington, Lamar, you could also throw in a Jay Harris if you want to, but Jordan Davison, those are the 4 players. Hill, Whittington, Lamar, and Davison are those 4 players. I mean, and let's not forget about Mekhi Hughes, who was projected as a starter and projected to lead in the Big Ten Conference this year, or one of the running backs that could have led the conference because transferring in and everything. So Oregon's got plenty of running backs to choose from. Penn State primarily with Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allar, but it's just honestly pick a running back and send him out there for Oregon this season to this point. And that shows the depth, that shows what they have on offense at any given time. So just because a running back comes out of the game and it's like, oh, that's their starter. Well, their next guy, he's honestly just as good. And then the guy after that, and then the guy after that. But one of the key matchups here is going to be Oregon's passing attack, which of course we focused on Dante Moore, but who he's throwing to. True freshman, 5-star receiver. You'll see it when you're watching, if you're just kind of following the highlights or the play-by-play of it on ESPN or a score tracker, and it'll say D Moore to D Moore. Well, the other D Moore, DeCorian Moore, is a player that is going to truly break out sooner rather than later. So we are going to talk about him, the passing attack, and more. First impressions here. Penn State versus Oregon. We'll get to your comments as well here on this live show, this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is brought to you by Mazda. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward for those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, they keep moving the game forward. And we're going to talk now. Penn State's been on a bye week here, but still got to focus on performances from last week against Villanova. So it seems so far away, and we're talking about Oregon here, but I still think back to the play. To really put this one out of game and maybe put yourself a little more in the rotation to establish yourself. This was important for true freshman defensive back Jameer Joseph. Joseph had a pick six, first career interception, first career touchdown all at once. Read the coverage perfectly, sat back in the zone, and honestly, the way he was running, there was no denying him a chance at the end zone. So it's those kinds of plays that really move the game forward, really move your career forward, and really move up your playing time in the lineup as well. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's show is also brought to you by Wayfair. The weather's cooling down and the days are getting shorter, and that has me wanting to make my home feel even cozier. And when it comes to cozifying your space this fall, Wayfair is the place to go. Wayfair is everything you need to set the mood for the season, whether it's comfy recliners, warm bedding, autumn decor, or even an espresso machine so you can make your favorite latte at home. So, and best part about Wayfair is you think that, hey, maybe delivery is going to be tough. No, it's hassle-free delivery. Delivery's fast. Delivery's free. It's hassle-free, which makes a huge difference when you are refreshing your home. It's the perfect time to set up your home for the fall so you can enjoy cozy nights with your family and friends. Cozify your space with Wayfair's curated collection of easy, affordable fall updates, from comfy recliners to cozy bedding and autumn decor. You'll find it all for way less at wayfair.com. That is WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style and every home. And thank you so much for joining me on this live show here of Locked On Nittany Lions. Get to the comments section as well. I do want to finish up with the offense, then talk to you in the comments section, and then get back to the defense, because it's a little controversial to say that Penn State is going to be able to run the football effectively against Oregon's defense, and I'll explain why later on. But I do want to continue with this passing attack, because why Oregon is so effective. It's honestly, I think I'm the most intrigued with how Penn State's going to handle Kenyon Sadiq. But I let off with Dacorian Moore and Malik Benson as well. So it's kind of a pick your poison situation, right? Kenyon Sadiq, I think if he continues to develop this way, continues to play this way, the athleticism's off the charts. That is a second round at a minimum. I think I'm being generous there. I do expect him, I don't want to, top 10 pick, top 15. I don't want to over exaggerate, right? I want to be nuanced about this, but I do have that expectation for Kenyon Sadiq that he should be a first round NFL draft pick. So that's just one matchup. And how does Penn State contain him? Well, Zakee Wheatley, that's going to be extremely important. That's going to be that free safety matchup where Penn State, Jim Knowles, they are going to try to match up Zakee Wheatley primarily, and that's the battle. This is one of them. Zakee Wheatley versus Kenyon Sadiq, and then, honestly, Dacorian Moore versus A.J. Harris, or A.J. Harris versus Malik Benson. Whoever's going to be that true wide receiver one in Penn State versus Oregon, it's A.J. Harris versus one of those two wide receivers. Obviously, I think most of us would agree that Dacorian Moore is going to be a better wide receiver long-term than Malik Benson, but broadcasters point this out. Dante Moore and Malik Benson have said, hey, we're good friends. So for the time being, you could make the argument that Malik Benson is the wide receiver one, the main target for Dante Moore and this Oregon offense. But you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with either of them. They have a pretty even workload to this point. Benson, 11 catches. Dacorian Moore, 9 catches to this point. But the yardage is fairly similar, 161 to 144. Like I said, it's just kind of, pick which pass catcher you're going to primarily defend against. And that's where Penn State's going to be up to the challenge, is going to have to be up to the challenge of it, because you don't really get the luxury of, okay, well, we're going to shadow one player and we're going to leave safety help over the top. No, it's going to be a lot of man-to-man coverage. This is what Oregon wants to do. This is what Will Stein wants to do. And it worked last time Penn State played against Oregon in that Big Ten championship game, where you isolate a Tez Johnson and you get him in one-on-one favorable situations. But A.J. Harris is a really good cornerback. So the same praise that I give for Kenyon Sadiq, I had the same thought process for A.J. Harris. I don't believe he'll slip past the second round. And I do believe that he will be a first-round pick if he continues this trajectory. Elliott Washington, Davian Collins, that's the matchup that it could be potentially consequential for Penn State, where you have Malik Benson and A.J. Harris lined up on one play. Okay, Elliott Washington and Davian Collins. I expect to see more of Elliott Washington. I grouped them together because they're in a starting cornerback battle still for that CB2 spot behind A.J. Harris. That is where that matchup for Penn State could be pivotal. I like grade on grade, elite on elite, which is why I say Zakee, Wheatley, and Kenyon Sadiq versus, or an A.J. Harris and a Malik Benson, but it's that second wide receiver option versus Elliott Washington, who's truly not a proven starter yet because he's still in a starting battle. Or is it Davian Collins? I am expecting more of Elliott Washington because in a game like this, it demands better pass coverage. Elliott Washington is the better pass defender than Davian Collins. Collins is, there's not a sizable gap, but who's better more often than not? It's Washington. Who's better in run defense? I would easily argue Davian Collins. Much more physical, has very aggressive in the right way. You know, he's not egregious. He doesn't go over the top. He doesn't draw penalties, but he's physical. He's got an attitude to him. Whereas there's more of a finesse to Washington. He's faster. Washington's one of the fastest players on the team. You're going to need him out there quite a bit. So Zion Tracy's important in this game as well for Penn State. That defensive back trio of A.J. Harris, Elliott Washington, and Zion Tracy primarily going to have their work cut out for them for Oregon's pass attack. And then Kenyon Sadiq, to go back to that, Kenyon Sadiq had multiple touchdowns in that Big Ten championship game. Oh, I remember. So Kenyon Sadiq is going to be a focal point, to say the least, especially if Penn State's defensive backs are winning more often than not on the boundaries. That is where Dante Moore is going to look to. And Sadiq is more than just that check down, that safety. He can have the explosive plays too, even though the stats will not jump off the page initially here, because I don't want Penn State fans to be mistaken and say, well, why are you hyping up Sadiq when he only has, 5 receptions to this point in the season? That's just because there hasn't been the necessary volume. You're able to distribute the football a little more. You're going to see Oregon's passing attack really condensed, where they don't have the easy luxury to say, we'll throw here, we'll go here, we can go there. But they're going to focus more now on their stars. Okay, so that's a lot about the offense. I do want to get to the comments section because that's why we do the live shows, right? To bring you all into it. And we'll get this conversation rolling, then flip it over to Oregon's defense too. Let's go Ducks. So I'm glad we have the Oregon audience here. There we have it. We can run the ball on them for sure. Get to that in just a moment. We better win this game, and better yet, a national championship, because there will probably be another perfect storm for us. And it could be raining on the Whiteout game, right? Could be raining, interestingly. The weather's been so great in Pennsylvania, and then all of a sudden it's supposed to rain all this week and could potentially, I don't think it's supposed to be a downpour or anything, but weather could be a factor, could potentially be a factor. Again, anything could change. We're a week out, right? Penn State's run game will be key to beating us as an Oregon fan. Yes, it will. As I talk more about the offense and what Oregon can do and score at will and explosive plays, you want to keep that on the sideline. And how do you do that? You run the ball effectively. You establish 8, 10, 12, 15 play. Can you do that? Can you establish a 15 play drive if you're Penn State? They would like to do that. 5 yards, 5 yards, 5 yards, 5 yards. Okay, Oregon's selling out for the run. Tight end dump off in the flat. Drag route from Trevor Pena in the slot. But just chip away. And that also gives your defense a break to, hey, chance to recalibrate, catch your breath, because Oregon's go, 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 go. It's the way that Oregon operates, and that's why Penn State is adjusting to the 4-2-5, because it's not only, I mean, Washington likes to, go spread. Same with a USC. I'm not going to include UCLA in this conversation anymore. They're not part of that transition over to the Big Ten, and they're not part of the merger anymore, right? But that's the thing, is that Oregon's going to want to go tempo, and especially if the weather's nice, nicer, put a lot of pressure on Penn State to go, punch for punch with them. And that's the type of game they want to play. Oregon does not want to slow this game down. Penn State does. Penn State does a ton. Dante Moore does a slow spin move when he is trying to escape the pocket. Might get ugly. So I didn't talk about this with Dante Moore, and I should have focused on it a little closer to the top of the show, but I'm glad we brought up Moore again. Moore is not a dual threat, but he's mobile. He can move. I would not describe him as like, oh, nobody would, right? But he has subtle speed to him. He has escapability. Escapability is extremely important when you are not a true dual threat quarterback. He can maneuver outside of the pocket, avoid the rush, get 10, 15. Saw him against Oregon State. What was I think the play was, it might have been even 30 yards or so. It was a big explosive run for Dante Moore. And those are the things that he can do. So he's not a speedster. He's not going to be, this isn't going to be an option read type of situation, but that mobility it's the vision to see, okay, the pocket opened up here. I have an escape lane here. I can run here. It is necessary and I put a post out about this. Obviously not everyone's going to agree. That's fine. Defensive ends are going to be important for this containment. Okay. Deni Dennis Sutton, Zariah Fisher, Chaz Coleman. Chaz Coleman is going to have his work cut out for him, because this is where you test the discipline of a true freshman. Can you contain when you're just rushing upfield and you're just trying to get to the quarterback by any means necessary, and you overextend on that play? Dante Moore will cut right underneath and go where you vacate that space if you are not conscious as a freshman defensive end. So Chaz Coleman's got to stay disciplined if we're talking from the Penn State point of view, but trying to focus on what Oregon, right? First impressions of Oregon from the Penn State point of view. So Moore is mobile. Moore can move. Not a statue quarterback, not expecting him to be. Defensive ends are going to have to contain. Sometimes a quarterback spy will be necessary. Do I like the idea of a Tony Rojas or Amari Campbell being taken out of coverage? Not routinely, but on select situations, just to change it up. Just to change it up. When I'm watching that Oregon State game and I just see how easy it is for Moore to maneuver, it's like, you got to do something. Okay. You can say, hey, defensive ends, be conscious, stay home, that kind of thing. Be aware of it. Easier for the likes of Deni Dennis Sutton, right? He'll be on top of that. But in the case of, if Moore is able to escape, sometimes it is not a bad idea in select situations to say, Tony Rojas, follow, just be that middle defender, be in a bit of a zone, but you follow Moore with wherever he goes. So you're not even taking him out of coverage. You're being conscious of what Dante Moore can do while defending the middle. It's okay. You can do both. I'm not saying you mirror him and you say, but right? You run with him, you watch him, and you see him start to step up in the pocket, boom, you close. Okay? That's my argument when I say, hey, you got to spy him. You got to do something, because he's not a statue. He's not just going to sit back in the pocket all day. He will extend plays. You have to go get him. He will go get those yards if you let him. We'll talk about the defense, continue with this back and forth in the comments section. Again, first impressions here of Penn State versus Oregon. Whiteout game. ESPN's College Game Day does the right thing too. They're coming to State College. They'll be at University Park. We got plenty more to cover here on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home. Whether it's the local sports bar packed on those game days, the coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. And when the neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. So Think of McClanahan's Convenience Store, In-State College. These are the businesses that work with Square to help grow the local businesses, to help grow the local neighborhood. So they're spots like that, the kind of place where you walk in, everybody knows your name, the staff, they're like family, they've been serving the community for years. Think of that. These are the local spots that are what make a neighborhood feel like home, and so many of them run on Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. That's Square. See you in the neighborhood. Today's episode is also brought to you by DoorDash. It is the weekend, but let's look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Now let's break it down. So I already talked about one defender in a previous segment, but I want to focus on two defenders now at linebacker, Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas for Penn State. They delivered in a big way this past weekend as against Villanova. Again, Penn State's significantly better than this team, but Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell came to play. Campbell leading the team in tackles. Rojas leading the team in sacks. So I mentioned him as a QB spy. Well, how does he do that? How did he do that? By being able to track the quarterback down when he moved outside of the pocket. But if you've been watching week to week, you know these performances were not a fluke. And just like Campbell and Rojas delivered for Penn State, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day only with DoorDash, promo period through November 18th, and terms apply. All right, we get into this final segment here, and this is where we will, conclude things. But like I said, first of many conversations, going to talk with Spencer McLaughlin, my counterpart over at Locked On Ducks. Soon enough, get some Big Ten reactions as see what games are going down now. But this defensive matchup, so Oregon's defense versus Penn State's offense, I'm here to say that Penn State will be able to run the football against Oregon. They've proven it in the past, and they're going to be able to do it again. And it's because I have questions about Oregon's interior of the defensive line. It's not to say that they're bad. It's not to say that, right? But I look at the matchup. Okay, Penn State's offensive line. This was the same group because Oregon's defense is extremely talented. They're fast. They complement the offense, right? They do the same things. They want to use speed. They want to force turnovers, right? They have players that fly all around the football field. But when I watch the defense, okay, it's the linebackers that are stepping up. It's the defensive backs that are stepping up. I want to see more organic plays generated by the interior of the defensive line. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at, because, everyone will point out to me. Anybody that disagrees will say, well, look at the yards per game and look at this and look at that. But I'm looking at more than just that. I'm looking at what is the offense, what kind of push is Northwestern's offensive line getting? They did a better job against Oregon State. But okay, remember, this is Oregon State. This is Oklahoma State. This is Northwestern. These are teams, particularly that game against the Wildcats, where the offensive line, hey, they did more than just held their own here. This is a team that you should be able to get organic pressure against. You shouldn't have to commit extra guys to the box. The offensive line shouldn't be able to do as well as it's doing in this given matchup and given the game script as well. That's all I'm here to say. And when I look at, Oregon, remember, had a nice dynamic duo led by Derek Harmon a season ago. First round NFL draft pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you lose two key players in the middle of the defense, two starters. Now, Oregon is certain, they ended up winning a battle. Penn State certainly would want a player like Bear Alexander right now playing for them and being an added defensive tackle depth. Well, they won that battle in the transfer portal. So that's one player. Bear Alexander is going to be a key contributor this season for Oregon and is already making an impact. But it's that interior of the defensive line. Does Oregon need to overcompensate at points and times if Penn State's going to run inside zone? I think so. I think they're going to have to commit linebackers. Bryce Betcher, for example. Betcher's one of those players that is all over the football field. You have to identify him on a play-by-play basis. Where is he? Where is he going? Allar versus Betcher, that, a little bit of a mini chess match, because I know it's mainly the coordinators. It's going to be Andy Kotelnicki, going up against Oregon's defensive coordinator. But Betcher versus Allar, in that, to make checks on the defense versus the offense, it's going to be that battle within the battle, right? So that is where I look at Penn State and say the offensive line from that Big Ten championship game that nearly ran for 300 yards, mind you, 300 yards. 80% of the offensive line is back from that game. The two running backs that ran for 100 apiece are back from that game. The two defensive tackles that were really good and allowed those yards are not back from that game, is my point. Penn State's offensive line is in a really good spot. Oregon's defensive line is still, the defensive ends, pass rushing situations. Mateo Uiagalelei, Tatum Tuioti, they're primarily pass rushers, but they set the edge. They're not liabilities in run defense. My argument is that Penn State's offensive line is better than the setup that Oregon has. Okay? And if you have to overcommit the linebackers, the defensive backs, just to stop the ground game, that's where Penn State play action, plays to the tight ends, a deep ball to Devontae Ross over the top just to keep those defensive backs honest. That's where those plays can happen. Okay? So that's my point, is that I wanted to see, and I saw it a little more against Oregon State, not necessarily against Northwestern, but competition. Oregon State is not a good football team. They just made so many mistakes, self-inflicted mistakes, but Oregon capitalized on them, right? That's still a solid victory across the board. All I'm trying to say is Penn State has the advantage in that O-line running back battle going up against that first four of Oregon's. And they're going to have to do that. They're going to have to commit to the ground game. I already mentioned the linebackers there, right? Led by Bryce Betcher. He's impact player, key player. I know people would argue Uiagalelei, Tuioti, maybe as the best players on this team. Thieneman in the back end of the defense. We'll talk about the secondary here. I think it's Betcher. Just because of the things that he does, he may not be necessarily the most talented player, but it's the combination of size, speed, play recognition, cerebral player. That is what I think of with Bryce Betcher, all over the place for Oregon. He makes this, and he's leading the team in tackles right now. So he makes the defense go. As for the secondary, so the secondary got an extreme makeover through the transfer portal. Completely new look. Of course, they get talented players, and they all complement each other well. They've also had some injuries to the secondary. They're playing a lot of young players early. Now, these are former high-end 4-stars and high-end and 5-stars as well. Naeem Offord is playing a ton. I'm surprised at this. I really thought that Brandon Finney would go through a red shirt, but he's playing a ton. If he's a starter, I'm not mistaken, or if he just rotates in pretty frequently there, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there, but Finney's playing a ton as a true freshman, and that's a recruiting battle that Penn State lost. So you can see why he's playing very early for the Ducks. I worry about Oregon's chemistry in the back end of the defense. And that was a little bit on display against Oregon State in this recent game, where, just communication, understanding assignments and roles that complement one another. If you're bracketing a receiver, one play in particular where Oregon State did not make a play, but it's these subtle things where a better team's going to make you pay for it, is going to make you pay for that mistake. So you pass off a receiver on the boundary to the middle on a post, for an example. The DBs, are you on the same page with that? Probably not as routine as you would want them to. In this case, at least early on. So Oregon secondary, ton of talent, but you got to work through these things. I could say the same thing for Penn State's passing attack as well. Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson, and Trevor Pena have not played a lot of football with Andy Kotelnicki's offense between each other, right? They're veterans, but they haven't played a ton together as the three wide receivers, more importantly with Drew Allar. So it's kind of this situation where Oregon has those issues, but so does Penn State's passing attack. Which team's going to be further ahead at that point in time? Maybe Oregon. I would say Oregon. This is where the battle testing matters a little more here. where you can work on those things, those imperfections, and kind of get those right, because it's you're battle tested. You're going up against teams that, hey, at least they're Power 4. It's not 3 FCS group of 6 and then a bye week. No, Oregon, I think, has that advantage. So will that pay off in the scheme of things? Time will tell, right? All right, so those are just general first impressions of what to know about Oregon, Dante Moore, the backfield, the wide pass catchers, offensive line that, brand new for them, right? They had to go to the portal to get, but I've been impressed with them. You want to talk about communication and chemistry issues? Not a whole lot. And then the defense, Oregon's defense has smothered an Oklahoma State team that we found out is really not that good. Oregon State, really not that good, but still, and then shutting down Northwestern until towards the end of the game. At outstanding stuff from Oregon. And that's why a team that I always thought this was a playoff team, but I don't think I expected them to be this efficient right out of the gate. It's fair to say I still thought they'd be elite. I thought this would be a top 10 matchup. I didn't think they'd lose any of these games, but the way that they're winning is still very impressive. One final time in the comments section. So I want to make sure that I get my spot correct. Oregon is going to rotate out of a 7-deep running back room on you guys, and they will be all fresh the whole game, potentially. So I said 4, right? So it's all the way up to 7. It will be interesting to see the different schemes of our coordinators, how they will come up, and that they didn't show in the first 3 games. Absolutely true. I do think that Penn State was holding back some things, as do I think the same thing for Oregon. I think we will see new wrinkles on both sides of the offense and defense for both teams. Yes, Will Stein will open up the playbook this game, and as he should. I've already described it at this for Penn State. This is a leave it all on the field type of game. Everything. Leave it all on the field, because your direction for your season for both Penn State and Oregon is wildly different if you lose this game. Especially for Penn State. I don't know if I can speak to the same way for Oregon, but Penn State has a lot more to lose here, in my opinion, with this game than Oregon does. I think the key to the game is Penn State's ground game against Oregon's defensive line. Oregon's D-line worries me going against Penn State. So we're on the same page there. Oregon did a better job stopping the run today, but started off slow in the first quarter. Yes, like I said, I saw improvements. But I want organic, right? Your 4 defensive linemen, can you stop the run organically, or do you need, press with the linebackers, bring an extra defensive back into the box, because then that opens up the rest of Penn State's offense. Noah Whittington will play against Penn State. He could have played against Oregon State. Yes, he was questionable, if I wasn't mistaken. So that's good news for Oregon. Good news for a great ball game. I just hope you guys are rested. Talk about a gauntlet. Now you play at home. Rough. If you get through these past 6 months of preparation, Oregon has no chance. Do I sense a little bit of sarcasm there? Definitely the gauntlet of Villanova, FIU, and Nevada, blank in there. And then the bye week. I think it sets up nicely for Penn State, of course, again, battle tested. Well, okay, maybe they're not necessarily battle tested, but they're healthy, they're rested. They have 2 weeks to prepare. It's a home game. You got to travel across the country for Oregon. All those things matter. They matter a ton. Didn't even get to this. Super happy. This is where I will finish up. Super happy College Game Day will be at Penn State. NBC's Todd Blackledge and Noah Eagle are calling the game. Todd Blackledge, who played quarterback for Penn State and won a national title. Everything is set for an epic battle. Go Ducks. So yeah, everything is, I think you said it perfectly. The setup, the atmosphere. I'm glad ESPN made the right decision. I was worried. Hey, Georgia, Alabama, that game's right there for the taking. The SEC. It's because of the alignment among the broadcasts. We talk about the conference realignment. How about the broadcast realignment, where ESPN's everything SEC, Big Ten is everything for Fox, NBC, CBS. So there's a clear separation of powers. There's not a lot of crossover. Okay, well, there's the Big 12 and everything, right? But aside, because that's a split broadcast deal. But we see a true separation. Why would ESPN? I never thought in a million years, why would ESPN pass up on an SEC Alabama versus Georgia? Because they couldn't, because that's how elite Penn State versus Oregon is as a matchup. This could, if the rankings adjust, I mean, we're talking top 5. This is a top 5 matchup. Let's be honest here. This is a top 5 matchup. This is Oregon being a hair outside of the top 5. I think they're better than Miami. I think they're better than LSU. Georgia, okay, I would move Georgia up, but I look at Penn State as, number 2. They haven't really played like it to an extent, but you could make the argument that Penn State and Oregon are the second and third best teams in the country. This is a top 5 matchup. ESPN College Game Day doing the right thing instead of, we're aligned with the SEC, right? The selfish decision, the right decision was being in Happy Valley. They did just that. My name is Seyko, the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, as always. Thank you so much for joining me on this late live edition of the show. Again, more conversations, more matchup analysis all throughout the week. It's going to be more than just, hey, 5 episodes, your standard. No, you're getting everything in depth because this might be the most consequential game of the season. It is fair to say that this could be the most consequential regular season game for 2025. And we're a week away. We're going to talk about it all more. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new to the channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. We do this daily here, talking about Penn State football, wrestling, recruiting, basketball, hockey, you name it. It's all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.